Hey guys, tonight we're taking a little trip. Not to a castle, not to some marble palace full of bickering royals and incestuous family trees, but somewhere much less glamorous. A place with mud. Lots of it. The kind of mud that clings to your soul. So, get cozy, dim the lights, maybe wrap yourself in a blanket that hopefully doesn't smell like wet socks, because tonight we're descending into the trenches. World War I. A time when the world thought industrial progress meant we'd all be flying cars by 1920. But instead, it meant machine guns, barbed wire, and a generation of young men living like moles. Let's set the scene. It's 1914. Europe, as usual, is having a disagreement. But instead of politely exchanging letters about who owns which colony or whose archduke just got shot, they decide to solve it the old-fashioned way, with millions of men armed to the teeth marching enthusiastically into what they think will be a quick, glorious war. Spoiler? It wasn't quick. And glorious is a stretch unless your idea of glory involves trench foot and cold tinned beef. The Great March that wasn't so great. In the early weeks, soldiers on both sides, British, French, German, Austrian, and the rest of the overconfident bunch, believed they'd be home by Christmas. You can almost hear the optimism. "Don't worry, darling, I'll be back before the tree's up." They packed shaving kits, books, and family photos. Some even brought musical instruments. They had no idea they'd soon be living in a damp ditch, surrounded by rats the size of cats and corpses that wouldn't leave. The first few months looked kind of normal. Armies moved, horses trotted, officers barked orders, and then everything just stopped. Modern weaponry made traditional warfare impossible. You couldn't just run at a machine gun nest and expect to survive. So both sides did what any group of humans do when they don't know what else to do. They dug in, literally. And thus began the era of trench warfare, the human attempt to outweight bullets.
limb to moisture. The daily routine of absolute misery. Now, you might be wondering what a typical day looked like for a soldier in the trenches. It's simple. Routine, repetition, and a slow erosion of sanity. Mornings started early, before dawn, with something called Stand To. Every soldier stood on the fire step, rifle ready, because dawn was a popular time for surprise attacks. After a while, when nothing happened, they'd have breakfast. Usually a ration of bread, maybe some jam, and tea, assuming the water wasn't contaminated by something floating in the trench. Then came maintenance, fixing sandbags, draining water, reinforcing walls. It was like home improvement, but with artillery. The rest of the day was mostly waiting. Waiting for orders, waiting for mail, waiting for nightfall, waiting for anything, really. Some played cards, wrote letters, or smoked endlessly. Others just stared into the distance, counting the days since they'd last seen anything that wasn't gray or brown. And then, at night, things got busier. That's when most movement happened, resupplying, digging new trenches, repairing barbed wire, or sneaking across no man's land for reconnaissance. No man's land, by the way, was the narrow, deadly strip of mud between opposing trenches. Usually 100 to 300 meters wide, it was littered with craters, bodies, and tangled wire. Crossing it was like walking through a nightmare in slow motion, except you were awake, and very likely about to be shot. The smell that never left. One thing everyone in the trenches remembered, even decades later, was the smell. It was a horrifying cocktail of unwashed bodies, stagnant water, dead rats, and decomposing men who were too dangerous to retrieve. Add to that the stench of wet uniforms, rotting food, and chemical weapons, and you've got
A scent that could haunt your dreams forever. One soldier described it as a blend of death and decay that clung to everything. Another said it was like the world itself had gone bad. There's no candle version of that, thankfully. Letters, love, and loneliness. Through it all, letters from home were the one thing that kept many men sane. They arrived in stacks, sometimes delayed for weeks, covered in mud and fingerprints. Reading them was like touching another world, one with sunlight and normalcy. Soldiers wrote back constantly, trying to sound brave and cheerful, pretending that trench life wasn't eating them alive. It was a strange theater, both sides performing normalcy for the folks at home. Some men fell in love through those letters. Others got Dear John notes, which were basically early 20th century breakup texts. Either way, mail call was the emotional heartbeat of the trenches. The wildlife experience. If you think nature heals, think again. Trenches were full of life, just not the kind you'd want. Rats thrived. They fed on corpses, grew enormous, and were completely unbothered by humans. Soldiers shot them for fun or frustration, but there were always more. Then came lice. Tiny, persistent, impossible to escape. They lived in seams of clothing, crawled over skin, and spread a fever known as trench fever. Men tried to boil their shirts to kill them, but it never worked. So the itch became a part of life, a small, maddening reminder that comfort was a distant memory. The soundtrack of the trenches. The noise never stopped. Artillery in the distance, machine guns rattling, whistles blowing. Sometimes it was quiet, a silence so heavy it made men more nervous than the bombs. Then, suddenly, without warning, the ground would shake, everything would turn into chaos. Soldiers quickly learned to tell different shell sounds apart. Incoming, outgoing, big, small, close, too close. You didn't so much sleep as drift in and out of exhaustion while explosions punctuated your dreams. And yet somehow, amid the horror, life continued. Men joked, they sang songs, they played soccer when things were calm, even across enemy lines, as famously happened on Christmas in 1914, when British and German soldiers climbed out of their trenches and exchanged gifts, cigarettes, and a quick football match before returning to killing each other the next day. Because humanity, it seems, is weirdly consistent. Let's float over to another corner of this muddy purgatory, where officers sip lukewarm tea, plans are drawn on soggy maps, and everyone is pretending that strategy still exists. That's where we'll pick up next time.